As China offers us an alternative way to develop ourselves. Only a liberated path that China has pursued can get us out of the poverty that we are in.
I mean, as early as 55, China stood up for Africa. China stood up for Egypt in the context of the Suez Crisis, when European powers sought to control the canal, which is on Egyptian soil. President Nasser nationalized it.
Young people needed to understand this history in China. Young people needed to understand this history in Africa. Because all over the world, the big changes that take place, the revolutionary changes that take place because of the involvement of young people. Young people are the most moved, quickly moved by injustice, quickly moved by exploitation, quickly moved by oppression. They react very quickly. And if you are not revolutionary as a young person, it's highly unlikely that you'll be a revolutionary in your old age. So we want young people in China, we want young people in Africa to understand where we are coming from, to analyze things for themselves, to see things for themselves, to hear things for themselves, and come to their own conclusions. Because today, lies are being told about China. China is being slandered every day. There is calm. But how else can they continue to exploit the world if it's not by lies? If it's not by calumny? If it's not by propaganda? They have never hesitated to use lies, to use slander against their opponents, especially over the last couple of years against China. That's the way they operate. Lies is part of their way of operating, way of interacting with the world. But for us, who stand on the other side, lies have never been our methods. Calumny has never been our methods. Falsehoods have never been our methods. The truth moves slowly. Lies move very fast. But unfortunately for lies, they've got short legs. They don't go very far. Truth goes very far. Their lies against China, their propaganda against China is starting to become known. More and more young people in China, in Africa, are starting to understand what the world they live in is. What the lies they are being told, they are starting to see them as lies. And that gives us a lot of confidence. We revolutionaries on the African continent, for the few days I've been here interacting with young people, I'm confident the Chinese revolution is unstoppable, totally unstoppable. A new wave of progressive young people following the footsteps of Chairman Mao, understanding the theories of Deng, and understanding and following very closely the thought of President Xi, will make this Chinese revolution invisible. Those who think this revolution will disappear, they are cheating themselves. This is unstoppable.
For young people everywhere, in Africa, in China, the shared history is often forgotten. Africa started to become independent and the kind of support that China had. But people also need to remember that at some point in history, in the 19th century, we were both colonized. But large parts of China were subject to European rule. It was carved up pretty much the way Africa was carved up. You had the French here, you had the British elsewhere, and so on. And I think what China refers to as a century of humiliation. It was in many respects similar to the way Africa was treated. Many respects, except we of course had the Berlin Conference, which carved us up, into 55 different countries.
That humiliation unites us.
Yeah.
That history of humiliation, of being colonized or semi-colonized, unites us.
Yeah.
The countries you see in Africa, the 53 or 54 countries you see in Africa, were not there before 1885. Before 1885, it was just one continent with rivers and valleys. We had no countries. They went to Berlin, the major European nations of that time, including the USA, which had just become independent in 1776, was there in Berlin, including representatives of the Tsar in Russia. No representatives from Africa. They went to Berlin and shared Africa among themselves, like a piece of cake, just cutting. So the countries you see today were not created by us Africans. They were created by the Europeans, not for us, but for themselves.
To manage their conflict.
Yes,
prevent
and they wanted
war.
to continue holding on to these territories for themselves, not for us. They did not create them to give them to us, to manage, to enjoy, to live in. No. They carved them for themselves to continue exploitation of minerals and indeed even of human beings. They traded us like commodities across the Atlantic Ocean. We were bought and sold and resold and resold. We were not only participants on the capitalist market, we were also commodities on it. That history cannot be forgotten.
That's also a history China shares.
That history of humiliation, we share it with China. And that's why the Chinese people understand the pain of humiliation. They know what we went through because they went through it. China today is a great country with a great economy, with a great people. But they don't want to accept that China has made progress. They don't want to accept the achievements of the Chinese people. They still want to play them down. They never want to acknowledge that. We, the friends of China, are seeing that progress. And to us, China offers us an alternative way to develop ourselves. We will never get anywhere following the path paved by our colonizers. Only a liberated path that China has pursued can get us out of the poverty that we are in. We have more to learn from China. We have more to cooperate with China. We have more to do with China. China is a source of inspiration for us. And because it's a source of inspiration for us, we have to defend China. We have to defend the achievements of China because these are our achievements. What China has gained over the last 40 years, a good part of it is starting to get to Africa. As I said, China is helping us build our infrastructure. We have many young people coming to Chinese university to be educated. We need to understand how China has gotten, especially over the last 40 years. We need to understand how China has moved from 1949 to today. We have to understand what type of leadership is needed or was needed, and how that leadership was constructed. We need to understand how the Chinese people were mobilized to achieve what they have achieved. This inspiration to us is of great importance. Some people say cooperating with China is having China interfere in our internal affairs. Yes, we know China has a policy of non-interference in the affairs of other countries. But non-interference in the affairs of other countries does not exclude solidarity, does not exclude taking a position. It does not mean doing nothing. And what is international solidarity in the first place? International solidarity is a realization that fighting the same war, albeit on different fronts, for the betterment of humanity. We are in the same vessel. headed in the same direction. If this vessel hits an iceberg, all of us perish. The injustice done to one nation, to one people, should be felt by others, deserves indignation from others. China has been built on those lines of international solidarity, of caring for other human beings, of sharing, and of ensuring a peaceful world. That's what builds peace.
China has built itself up without invading anybody, without enslaving anybody, without colonizing anybody, as you said. And really, if Africa is looking at its options today, there's nobody to enslave. Who are you going to enslave in today's world? Who is Africa going to colonize in order to extract their resources and use to build up in the way that Europe was built on the basis of African blood and sweat? It's not an option. Realistically speaking, in today's world, the only way forward is through a reorganization of society. China has demonstrated that that's possible. The Soviet Union demonstrated it, but ran into internal problems and collapsed. China has taken that much, much further and has demonstrated that it is possible to develop a country, to develop sovereignty, to develop dignity and security without militarization, without having to impose your will forcibly on other people and suppress other people. That has to be the vision of the future. In the nuclear world, there's no other way to grow. If social development is based on military conflict, then we're all dead within a few decades at worst. That can't be the future. So the powers who are busy building military bases, trying to enforce their access to other people's resources, other people's land, they're lost. They're taking us all into a tailspin to death and destruction. There is no future for even their own children on the path that they're leading. It's such a glaring thing.
Genuine goodness is always threatening to those on the other side of the moral spectrum. The goodness, the genuineness, the solidarity, the selflessness of China cannot be understood by those on the other side of the moral spectrum. They can't understand it. Mm-hmm. They cannot understand that we can have a relationship with China that is not abusive, that is not exploitative, a relationship in which we are not humiliated, but we are treated with respect as equals. They can't understand that because throughout the capitalist existence, there has been domination, subjugation, humiliation, exploitation, suppression of others. They can't understand that a country can develop without colonizing another country, without humiliating another people. That's what China has done. Again, genuine goodness is always threatening to those on the other side of the moral spectrum.
They built a world in which, from their own statistics, 8 individual human beings own more wealth than half of the globe. 4 billion people own less wealth than the top 8 individuals. How is that sustainable when you have these crushing extremes of poverty and deprivation? How is that democratic? How can you build a democratic world?
They have created a world that today even they themselves are scared of.
Scared of it.
This is the world that is destroying the environment. This is the world that is increasing poverty. This is the world that is creating unemployment.
That can't deal with pandemics.
That can't deal with pandemics. Can't deal with the problem of inequality, growing inequality. Every year in winter, they go to Davos. The best economic thinkers of capitalism the best businessmen of capitalism, the leading statesmen of capitalism, they go to Davos in Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. What do they discuss at Davos? Principally, they discuss 3 or 4 issues. They discuss growing inequality in the world, growing poverty in the world, growing unemployment in the world, and the destruction of the environment. These are the things they discuss, year in, year out. But they can't come up with solutions. We have not seen solutions from Davos. Why? Is it because they don't have good economists? They don't have good political thinkers, good sociologists, and so on? No, they have them. The problem is to resolve these 4 problems. To deal with these 4 problems, capitalism has to disappear. Capitalism has to go. Are they ready to make capitalism disappear? No, they are not ready.
They're ready to build more military bases.
Yes, and because they are not ready to let capitalism go, they come up with interventions that do not cure the problem, but simply try to stabilize, to reduce the impacts.
It's largely public relations.
Yes.
To make them look good.
But eventually, they will have to die. Yeah. Eventually, they will have to die. There's no alternative to that. This is the world we live in. So for us, it's very encouraging to see young Chinese people pick up the revolutionary banner that was passed to them by older generations of revolutionaries, outstanding revolutionaries, the core leaders of the Chinese Revolution. They are picking up this banner in new times, in new ways, but with the same determination and the same zeal, the same discipline, the same tenacity with which the older generations struggled to give us the China we have today.